The main thing we're here to talk about today is how important trade is. Trade is extremely important to farmers and ranchers in Nebraska. It's also very important to all Nebraskans. 1 out of every 4 jobs in Nebraska is related to agriculture, so as the agriculture economy goes in Nebraska, so does the economy of the entire state of Nebraska. About 30% of the gross revenue for all of agriculture comes from trade. It's, again, about a third of what we grow is taken someplace else in the world, so trade is extremely important. We also know that the average farmer in Nebraska exports about $100,000 worth of product. Now that would vary depending upon what you produce and the size of the farm, but that is a huge number, again telling us how important trade is. Trade will continue to be important because we have a growing population in the world. Over 7 billion people today, growing to over 9 billion people between 2040 and 2050. 95% of the U.S. population lives outside of the U.S. And so if we are going to be successful in what we do in agriculture, if we're going to be successful in Nebraska, trade will be very, very important. And there's a lot of things happening in trade, and so we're here to talk about that today and the importance of trade. And again, certainly appreciate you being here. And when several of us will make brief comments, and then we will open it up for questions. So at this time, I would invite the governor of the state of Nebraska, Pete Ricketts, to come forward.
Well, good morning, everybody, and just want to say thank you all for being here this morning on a great day. And Steve, thank you very much for hosting us here with this press conference to talk about the importance of trade. As Steve said, trade is incredibly important to the state of Nebraska. If we're going to grow Nebraska, we have to grow agriculture, and the way we're going to grow agriculture is through trade. As he said, 95% of the world's consumers lie outside the borders of the United States. And we have to go out there and get them. We've got to go out there and tell them about our quality products. And that's why it's so important that we strengthen those trade relationships. Now, I've been on trade missions to Japan twice, China twice, the European Union, Canada, Mexico. In fact, I just got back from Mexico, and we got a lot of great insights about what's going on in the Mexican market. First of all, they were grateful that we came down to say thank you to some of our best customers. Because, of course, Mexico is one of our largest trade partners and one of the largest destinations for our agricultural products. It's number 1 for our products like corn, and it's a great destination for dairy as well. And we want to expand those opportunities, and we found out that when we were down there in Mexico that they love doing business with us. The logistics work for them, and they like doing business with Americans. And they want to grow their markets as well in things like beef and pork, because they want to expand those, and so that creates more opportunities for us in corn and soybeans. And so we want to expand that marketplace. We also just finished up a conference yesterday with the U.S. Midwest Japan Association. Now, Japan is also a top market for us. Both Mexico and Japan receive about $1 billion from us in exported trade, and a lot of that is agricultural. Japan is our number 1 destination for pork and beef and eggs, number 2 for things like corn and wheat, and number 3 for soybeans. And again, we want to expand that marketplace so we can sell more of our quality products over there. And in fact, last year, our beef exports to Japan went up 26%, and our pork exports went up 46%. So the Japanese recognize the high quality products that we see, or that we have, and they want more of them. So what we have to do is continue to work on developing these trade relationships. That's why I've encouraged the Trump administration to get these trade deals wrapped up, and in constant communication with them about how trade impacts us here in Nebraska. When we were down in Mexico, we were very pleased to get very positive feedback from the Mexicans with regard to that trade agreement. And of course, since we've been to Mexico, the Trump administration has announced they've got an agreement with Mexico with regard to that. And we'd like to see Canada come on board with regard to that agreement and get that wrapped up. And we're encouraging the Trump administration on Japan, the European Union, and tackling China as well. All of these are important markets that we have the opportunity to be able to expand. And just want to go back to what Steve was talking about earlier. You think about those 2 billion more people that are going to be coming into the world population. And you think about rising standards of living in places like Asia. And you can see that demand in places like Japan, like I was talking about, for our pork and our beef. So there are a lot of great long-term trends for agriculture. But all of it happens if we make sure we have those trade relationships. So we've got to continue to emphasize that and continue to promote ourselves on the world marketplace. And I'm going to bring up Steve Wellman here in a moment. I just want to emphasize some of the great work they've done, because if you go back to 2005, beef exports from Nebraska made up about 5% of the overall U.S. beef exports. Today, beef exports from Nebraska make up close to 20% of all the U.S. exports. And that's the great work the Department of Agriculture has done here in our state to promote Nebraska beef. We want to do that for all of our products. And so one of the ways that we're going to help do it here today with all of you is we are going to proclaim that it is Agricultural Trade Awareness Day in Nebraska. So when I sign this proclamation, we will be official. All right, so we are official that today is Agricultural Trade Awareness Day.
Well, good morning. As we all know, Nebraska's farmers are some of the most productive in the world. We produce more food, feed, and fuel than we can use here in the U.S. So that's why exports are critical to our success. The value of agricultural exports goes to our farmers and throughout our communities. Agricultural exports impact our entire state. Exporting meats, grains, and fuels creates jobs. In 2016, farm receipts contributed over $21.5 billion to our state's economy. About 30% of that, $6.4 billion, was from exports. These exports create another $8.2 billion of economic activity. So due to increasing wealth in our exporting countries, the demand for meat, milk, and poultry is expected to increase by 50% in the next 15 years. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, the Economic Research Service, a 10% increase in agriculture exports would create over 1,000 jobs in the state of Nebraska. So Nebraska agriculture needs to be prepared to meet these opportunities. The Department of Ag is very active in helping grow our exports. Recently, we traveled to Vietnam to work on beef exports to that market. We accompanied Governor Ricketts to Mexico to thank our partners in Mexico. We recently participated in a U.S. Meat Export Federation trade mission to Japan, focused on our beef and pork exports there. Next week, the Department of Agriculture will host a group of foreign agricultural attachés from 16 countries, and they'll travel throughout Nebraska learning about our agriculture and looking for hopefully ways that we can export more of our products to those countries also. Most of our work that we do with the Department of Agriculture is done collaboratively with a lot of our farm organizations and the companies here in Nebraska, and we really appreciate their support in everything that we do and how we work together and partner with those efforts. So with that, let's start hearing from some of them. Let's start with Robert Johnston from the Nebraska Soybean.
And we want to thank Governor Ricketts for his long-term vision and his continued support for expanding trade and what that means to Nebraska producers. It's evident that Governor Ricketts knows the impacts that trade has made on Nebraska, from the livestock sector to row crops and the manufacturing industry as well. The governor earlier mentioned a recent trade mission to Mexico. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to be with him on that trade mission to Mexico. And he mentioned how appreciative the Mexicans were with the business that we do with them. And I was amazed at their hospitality and their graciousness. They want to do business with us. They want our product. They like our product. In fact, at one of the luncheons, I had an opportunity to be seated with a soybean buyer, Francisco Belden with Regasa Company. And he was telling me how many bushels of beans that he crushes. He said he crushes 240,000 bushel of beans a day. And I was amazed at that. And that's just one crusher. And there's other opportunities to sell beans to Mexico. So that was a great opportunity. I would, I'm not going to reiterate facts and figures. The previous speakers have mentioned some of that. China, of course, in the past has been our #1 buyer of beans. We don't want to give up on China, but I think because of the tariff issues, it's even more important to develop new trade and new markets in other places around the world. And I would say that Mexico is our #2 buyer of soybeans. But our #1 consumer of soybeans in Nebraska is animal ag. And so we want to keep that in mind. We just as well add value to the state and then export those meat products. So once again, it's obvious how much trade matters to Nebraska, and we appreciate the governor and his effort.
My name is Chris Roth. I'm the president of Reinke Manufacturing. We're located in Deshler, Nebraska. That's where our world headquarters are. And I say that because we do have distribution capabilities around the world. So trade is very important to us. It creates a lot of jobs for us. It's a significant amount of our revenue. But what I kind of wanted to focus in on more so than our revenue was what it means to Nebraska and other farmers across the country. We've got 225 dealers across the United States. We've got over 500 employees located in Deshler. So a significant amount of our trade, as you've heard from the statistics, is that our farmers have is related directly to trade. So what that means to us as a manufacturer in this state is a significant amount of those jobs then manufacturing that irrigation equipment goes right back to the trade of when we sell corn, beans, beef, sorghum, those kind of things across the world. It's very important to us as far as jobs goes. So, you know, an easy math would be is if you had 500 employees and 20% of your jobs go there, it's a significant number of our jobs are manufacturing those irrigation systems as it goes overseas. So I just wanted to thank Governor Ricketts for everything he does to help us with trade. Steve Wellman for that. It's very important to us. It creates a lot of jobs for us. It helps us support jobs in Deshler, and it helps create and support jobs across our dealer network across the United States. So thank you for helping us with trade. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mike Drennan. We have a family operation here in Nebraska. We've got 2 feedlots that are family owned and run in Columbus and Palmer, Nebraska, and it certainly is a pleasure to be here to discuss trade impacts to the livestock industry in our great state. One thing I wanted to start out with is that we are the beef state, and we're there for a reason. We provide $12 billion footprint that powers our state's economy. Nebraska is the nation's largest beef exporting state in the nation, and our global sales continue to significantly increase each year. In 2017, Nebraska beef exports increased by 12%. That resulted in $1.26 billion of extra revenue in this state. Although we're only 9 months into this year, if you would look at it, our state's producers are on track to exceed the record that I had just previously mentioned. Currently, USDA estimates that U.S. red meat exports are trending about 17% higher than last year. Nebraska's beef producers are responsible for the lion's share of that increase, for the demand of our product has skyrocketed in numerous markets. Since the reopening of China's market that our governor was very helpful with in this last year, our state's beef sales have exploded. The U.S. U.S. Meat Export Federation estimates that Nebraska accounted for 56% of total beef exports to China so far to date. That's tremendous. And also, Nebraska livestock producers also expect beef exports to top markets like Japan, Korea, and Hong Kong to increase this year as well to record levels. This success is a direct relation to capitalizing our international demand of high-quality Nebraska beef. And also with these exports, if I could note that it does for our producers, brings back roughly about $325 a head for U.S. beef across this state. So as I close, again, I want to thank the governor for this opportunity. We really appreciate he's been a champion for us on trade. And as a Nebraska cattleman, trade not only matters to us, but it's our livelihood. And thank you very much.